Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello, and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky, alongside my co-host, Dwight Brown from Salary.com. Hey, Dwight, how are you?
Hey, David. I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. As always, we try and find interesting people to talk to inside and outside the world of human resources that give us the latest as to what's happening in HR data, analytics, process, and technology. Today, we're talking to Joe Phoenix from Givinga.com. And Joe, you're going to tell us, because you're the CEO, you're going to tell us exactly what Givinga does, correct?
I'd be happy to start that way if that's where you all want to go.
Well, first of all, welcome to the show. And
yeah,
then,
thank you.
Next,
it's great to be here.
If you could tell us about who you are and what is Givinga, and we can get some background.
Great. I'm Joe Phoenix. I'm CEO of Givinga. We are a 5-year-old, what we refer to as a Philantech company. We combine financial technology with philanthropic vehicles. And our platform is designed to really do 4 things. It's designed to make giving accessible, efficient, transparent, and impactful. And we do that by blending these super cool vehicles together with technology and then plugging it into anyone who's giving money away and making that whole process easier.
Because while we may think that giving, and I'm being very serious when I say this, that giving is easy, sometimes it's not as easy as we think. And all the right things that we want to do sometimes get lost in translation when we, can't find the companies or the people or the philanthropic organizations we want to, and we don't know if there's a match for our company. So your platform makes it easier, right?
It does. I think that there are a lot of misconceptions around giving, and one of the main ones is that it's simple, right? You just pull your wallet out, whip out a credit card, give to charity, and you're done. And you know, if you're donating money and you don't care about things like, you know, how impactful those dollars are, transparency, the dollars flowing, et cetera, then yeah, it is easy. But if you're trying to be philanthropic, thoughtful, and making sure that those dollars are impactful as they leave, it's really complicated.
And we're going to get into that as part of what we're going to talk about today from the thought leadership perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Joe, what's the one thing that no one knows about Joe Phoenix?
The one thing that no one knows about Joe Phoenix. Well, I would think that very few people know that next to running a financial technology company, my second passion in life is digging in the garden in the back of my yard. It's a great balance for me. I love getting out there, and I don't know whether it's the finality of gardening, right, or the actual. People say get your hands dirty, and you know when you're back in the backyard, you do that. But I find just being outside and working with things that I feel are beautiful just gives me a balance that I found is just hugely important as you're working on all these other things.
That's cool. I just harvested the 7 pieces of corn that were all only 3 inches at most long because of the drought that we had in the Massachusetts area.
Right.
And my sunflowers, which barely grew. And if you looked at them, they looked like mutant sunflowers because of how awful and unpredictable the rain was this year.
Right.
It was terrible.
I think you weren't trying to grow baby corn.
No.
Yeah, it's why I've kind of left the vegetables to the professionals. I tend to stick with my wife loves it because most of what I garden is of the perennial variety.
Sure,
so there's not a lot to do except prune and water and trim, but it's a fun pastime for me.
I wish I stopped at that, but I also grow corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and the only thing that grew were those tiny corn. The cucumbers didn't even grow, and usually cucumbers can withstand some variety of watering, but no, they all died.
Well, so you've caught the bug. That's the problem with gardening. You start with one, and the next thing you know, you're down a path, and it's now starting to consume your life. So welcome to the club.
Yeah, thanks. As you say, like my nails have constantly gotten dirt underneath them. So yeah, right. I've gotten the bug.
Yeah.
So today our topic is one that's very important, especially for those of us who actually do like to be charitable and to have a portion of our income go to good causes. And those good causes could be varied depending upon your background. So today, given the guest we have, today's topic is going to be charitable giving as an employee benefit and how it's used to transform workplace culture. Mm-hmm. And so, again, this is something very near and dear to my heart because, as I said, I like giving a lot to charities. I love talking about this. So our first question then, Joe, is what is the state of corporate giving? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of distractions. Yeah. How does it get to be a part of corporate culture, and how do you center the employee in it?
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to direct you to a wonderful limited series podcast that Ryan and I recorded live at the ERE Recruiting Innovation Summit. We sat down with 20 recruiting and TA leaders from around the world to hear what today's best recruiters are doing to stay sharp, stay relevant, and stay ahead. It's called The Talent Shift. You'll love it. You'll find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, like, review, share. Do you?
Well, I think the answer to that is that corporate giving, from where I sit, is actually quite healthy. I think that a lot gets written on how efficient the process is. I think I would refer to it as healthy but frenetic. We've seen a pretty significant shift over the last 5 years of companies really realizing that philanthropic giving is not really a check the box exercise anymore. I think for a number of years it really was. I mean, if you walked into a company and said you give money to charity, they'd throw the United Way at you, check the box, and move on to the next question. I think that the environment right now, and by environment I mean the employees that they're hiring, that companies are hiring, the customers that they're interacting with, are demanding more than a check the box from companies. And I think that we started seeing this 6 or 7 years ago. And at one point I felt like I was pushing the Sisyphus ball up the hill and having it roll back down on me every month. But, just a confluence of events over the past 2 or 3 years have really, I think, increased the focus on the importance of this, whether it's the George Floyd murder and all the social unrest that happened after that, the COVID pandemic, and what that did to employees and customers of these companies, and the fact that the new generation of both consumer and employee are just looking at the world differently. And I don't think that this is a fad. I think this is a trend, and I think that this trend is here to stay. And I think that when you start talking about this new generation, and I think a lot's been thrown around about the millennial generation, and that generation gets beaten up a lot. What people don't realize is that the millennial generation is now in positions of authority and responsibility across corporate America, right? They're not entry-level employees anymore. They're decision makers, and companies are beginning to mirror and reflect some of the things that these new generations hold as important aspects of being a human being on the planet day to day. And so to us, corporate philanthropy is moving very quickly from a check the box piece to a very important strategic part of what a company is doing day in and day out.
So there's two aspects of it, though. One of them is providing access to your employees to be able to donate. And the second is, what's the corporate culture around who is donated to from the corporate perspective? And I think we're not talking about the latter. We're talking more about the former. So it's not about who is the company giving to. It's about what platform and what do the employees want to give, and giving the freedom to employees to give based on their particular values and their culture, correct?
Well, I think that now you have to talk about both of those in conjunction with this whole discussion that you're having. I think you were able to bifurcate those and talk about them individually in the past. But right now, companies are thinking about not only providing employees with avenues to give, but I think that they're also now really beginning to consider, what does the corporation, want to project out into the marketplace? What does the corporation want to support? How can the corporation support employees around, this kind of shared approach to giving? And it's not mandating that employees give to one area, but it's providing some direction from the corporate side that, hey, this is what our company feels is important, but also then giving the employee the ability to support things outside of that main corporate functionality. These are all aspects of philanthropic giving that make what we're talking about much more complicated than it used to be.
But let's give a distinction between political giving and charitable giving, because there are lots of companies who have made lots of headlines because they donate to one political party or another. We're not talking about that. We're talking about which charities they support and how they go about doing it and to what extent they do it, correct?
That's correct.
Because, it's reflective of their culture then, and not to get political again, but it does then, to use that term that you use, bifurcate, it definitely will set up an avenue where your employees will then make a decision with their feet as to whether they want to support that kind of culture or not.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example, and before I give you the example, I'll ask a question, because this is always an interesting question, and the question is: can you name 5 companies on the planet and the causes that they support and how those causes link into the company's brand? And so, we can stop and think about this for a little while, but in general, I think it's very hard for you to come up with 5 companies and you say, that's what this company stands for. This is how their mission is aligned. Their employees are all behind this, and they've got this really super cool structure to try and drive that out into the world. And, I think that everyone would throw Patagonia as kind of the one company that walks the walk.
Sure. There's the sock company that donates socks for every,
Right.
There's things like that.
Bombas is a super cool company that, really built their entire corporate structure around this philanthropic piece of buy a pair of socks and we donate a pair of socks. Right. That is, and I think integral to their,
the same thing. Or
there's
another company that, from a shoe perspective, maybe it was not them, maybe it was Tom's, that buy a pair.
Yeah, Tom's. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, to your point though, it's difficult to name 5 all at one sitting.
It is. Yeah. But what's cool about it is, if the company gets behind that and the company really thinks about, okay, what does it mean to be an employee of this company? What does it mean for this company to exist? Those things can start to go hand in hand and become very powerful. I was sitting in a conference, and there was a presentation by Kroger. And I don't know if Kroger rings here, but they're kind of a Midwestern-based grocery chain, big. And Kroger has a full-on giving campaign, giving platform that they've had for a while. And it's simply no hunger, no waste. And that's basically what Kroger is focused on. And no hunger, because Kroger has perishable goods that they're throwing out constantly. So they've made it a mission of the company to really figure out, how do you dispose of that and get that food into the hands of people who need it? Right. So it's this kind of solve the hunger piece, and then make sure that we're not wasting things as we're doing that. Right. And then lo and behold, Kroger is now starting to stand up around that, all of these interesting campaigns and charitable activities around ending hunger, right? And, getting in front of that and leading. And it's an excellent example of, how strategic philanthropy can drive your brand and also entice people that are sharing kind of your sense of what is important in the world to join your company and become active in that.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
And I think this gets to the second question, where you were talking about, how does giving change the culture because the employee benefit is being driven off of those platforms. So I think we've already gotten there, or we're there. And so let's explore that a little further. So to that end, then the company has this mission, and they probably put it into their goals, especially from the leadership perspective. So now it's not just about who they're giving money to. It's about setting up their products and services and maybe even their supply chain to be able to support that kind of a thought process of, if we did this differently, we could take the fruit that's about to spoil, and before it spoils, we can put it in packages and then get it out to the agencies that either deal with homelessness or deal with hunger, and get it in their hands before it spoils so that it's usable within, a couple days, and not have to take the write down on it, and not have to, so they've changed the mindset of the leadership, and hopefully now that goes throughout. But how does that then translate to the employee giving and the ability to support those causes? How do you transition that?
Well, I think that what you're seeing in corporate America is that the employee-employer relationship, in our opinion, is changing. And I think that it was, there's still some elements where there is a friction that always exists between the company and its employees. I mean, we're seeing that in, big companies and very forward-thinking companies like Starbucks that are, right now, debating this whole unionization of the workforce. So I think that will continue to exist. But I think what you're starting to see companies recognize and employees recognize that in order to be philanthropic, right? So if I threw the word philanthropist out to you and we played word association, right, you'd probably come back with wealthy, rich, exclusive, never going to be me, right? Tech billionaire, whatever. And our belief is that anybody can be a philanthropist if you have the right tools and you have the right resources. And so I think what companies are realizing is that they have this massive amount of potential impact in their employee base. And on the other side, the employees are realizing that the way that I can become more philanthropic is by efficiently working with the employer that I'm currently working for to drive these dollars in a more meaningful way out to causes that support me. So I really think that what philanthropy does, if it's done well and strategically, is it gets parties that have had friction in the past aligned around common cause that then everyone can focus on driving forward. And that's what's really interesting about this evolution that's taking place right now in corporate America.
It is interesting seeing that evolution because in the past, employees just haven't viewed their employers as vehicles for being able to give. Whereas just overall, the relationship between employees and employers, and I think this is the point that you're making, really is changing that mindset to my employer is somebody who I can use as a vehicle. And, I think it's also reflective of the relationship that people are starting to view their employers as an extension of themselves, as opposed to in the past where it would just go, click my time card, get my hours in, leave, and then live my life outside of my employer.
Well, we could see the divergence happening now. I mean, quiet quitting is the new rage, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about something that has always been called something like disengagement or whatever it was. But what you're talking about, Joe, is the ability for people, and I think this is what you were talking about as well, Dwight, is that people want to rally around something to connect further with their employer, given the fact that we spend so much of our life at work, that instead of hating it and calling it the 9-to-5 and being frustrated by it and whatever, being able to embrace pieces of it, whether it's through an ESG, whether it's through BRGs, whether it's through giving, gives us that ability to bring it back or to take it back and to make it something that you feel very connected to. Giving is one of those things that makes you feel connected because you're investing either your hours or your money. And those are two very valuable things that we don't have a lot of these days. So,
That's right.
So I guess going back to your other point of the culture piece of this, us as employers and employees, being able to find the common ground to be able to rally around, whether you're a company like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which it's obvious what your mission is, or Kroger, which is trying to end hunger, which is wonderful, or Patagonia, which is trying to save the earth, which is laudable. Mm-hmm. All of those things matter. And so you bring that mission to the employee and then they brand it on themselves. then it's much harder to leave, right? I mean, it's much harder to disengage when you feel that connection, and it's talking your talk and walking your walk.
No question. And I think that a real key word in what you're talking about right now is accountability. And it's accountability really on the corporate side. And to some extent, it's accountability on the employee side. But when I say check the box, what I mean is that if you look at corporate giving's been around for 70 years. I mean, the first employee matching program was created by GE in the 1950s. I think it was 1954. And employee matching hasn't changed ever since that first employee matching program came out. And I think that employers sit around and kind of scratch their heads as to, well, geez, why aren't our employees using these programs? And then a lot gets written about dollars that are left on the table and employees aren't engaging and all of that. And I think that what it comes back to is if the employer is not accountable to this is the direction that we're going, and I can transparently show you how the company is standing side by side with you, and we can show you the impact that your dollars combined with our dollars makes to this kind of social footprint that we're building, right, then I think that you're onto something. If you're just standing up there saying, yeah, we give to charity, and I was in the financial services business for 30 years before I jumped over to run this company. And I remember one of the key giving pieces that we had at my old company was we had a United Way campaign every year that the company ran. And the company ran the United Way campaign because the company wanted to be recognized as one of the top United Way companies in the city of Boston. And it was very much of a put on the employees type of campaign. The announcement that the campaign was running coincided very, very closely with bonuses that were going to be paid. The message came from the C-suite that this was important. Recommendations were given as to what your title equated to the amount of giving that was appropriate. Right. And there was not a lot of engagement and accountability. You didn't feel like you're really part of anything. And I think that companies are realizing that there's a much better way of doing it and a much more impactful way of doing it that really brings this employee metric into it. And that's where this whole, corporate philanthropy, employee philanthropy, and just kind of philanthropic in general is really getting interesting because technology just allows you to do a variety of different things, whether it's tracking, managing, visibility, transparency that you just couldn't do in the past. So that's why this transformation is occurring the way that it is.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast, a free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. Before we get to technology, because that's our next step and our next question, the one thing I wanted to ask is, there are things beyond money. Like, for example, when I worked at ADP, we had hours set aside for doing volunteer work. Mm-hmm. And we were very encouraged to use that. And I really appreciate ADP for doing this. But we were also set up with opportunities to do things like Habitat for Humanity, mm-hmm. where it wasn't just the money. We were giving money, but it was also we were giving our time, which is, in fact, more valuable to the Habitat for Humanity because they needed bodies, they needed hands to be able to do these construction projects. So is there a thought process that it's because we're talking about culture here, it's about getting out and doing things, whether it's cleaning up, a particular piece of road or helping Habitat for Humanity or actually, painting that rec center or doing something good with your time or with employees' time?
Yeah, I think that the definition of the verb to give is being redefined as we speak. I think that in the old days, if I said, what does the verb to give mean? It meant pull your credit card out, pay 14% to somebody, be very reactive in the way that you're thinking about it. The money leaves and you don't think about it again until the next kind of disaster or catastrophe arises. I think that...
Or tax time.
or tax time, right? I think that these giving programs are kind of like fingerprints, right? You look at them, they all look the same, but then you get involved and you realize that almost everyone has got its own kind of unique angle to what either the company or the employees are trying to accomplish. And, as we move into the discussion on technology, what technology allows for is it allows for this creativity and innovation of what do you call giving? What is important to you as an organization? It doesn't just have to be funneling money from your employees to a charity. It can be around volunteering. It can be around disaster relief. It can be around grant management. There'd be all of these things. It can be all of those things, right? And I think that companies are realizing that there is this really interesting opportunity that allows them to really define what giving means to the company, what the company is going to pursue as it relates to that. And then, with these technology companies and these technologies that exist, they can go out and actually create these programs that are tailor-made to what they're trying to do.
Do the charities that get supported inside of these have to be 403(b) or I think that's the, sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry, 501.
501.
Now you've got
I was getting,
I was 401k
about the whole thing. I
501c3.
I apologize.
Yes.
Yeah. So that number. Mm-hmm. So does it have to be that, or are there other avenues for doing philanthropy beyond those charities to maybe things like investing in majority-owned female and people of color organizations? So being able to not only put the money towards charity, but also put them towards companies that do good, and as well, companies that are aligned around what your culture is and what you want to support.
Yeah, I think that probably the most eye-opening thing that's occurred as we've been building out the company and learning, and we're entrepreneurs. We learn every day. We've got this idea, and then you put it out there and the market tells you one thing or another, and you're like, I hadn't thought about that. The one thing that I have learned, these charitable vehicles that nobody uses, but that have been in existence for 80, 90 years, is how flexible they are. We went in saying, okay, we've got this super cool vehicle. It's called a donor advised fund. They have rules and regulations around them. The IRS is very specific. You can only give to 501c3 organizations, right? Okay. And then you get the unless it's a disaster. And in that case, there is a piece that allows a charitable organization to give directly to individuals, but there are 50 steps that you have to go through before that happens. And if you're tracking it on a spreadsheet, it's absolutely impossible. If you have technology that does that for you, it's a click of the button, and you have a dashboard. Right. And it's done. These charitable vehicles are incredibly powerful because they do, and the IRS has given them the flexibility to support, there are these organizations that are doing charitable work, but don't have a 501c3 designation because it's expensive to get and they're low resource. The IRS has figured out a way that a 501c3 public charity can sponsor a non-501c3 entity. It's called fiscal sponsorship. We just learned about this over the last year. So if you have all of that, all of a sudden your business starts to align around, you can do all these interesting things. You can do employee relief. You can do disaster relief. The company can get involved. It can be trackable. It can be managed so that you don't have a bunch of your employees passing dollars underneath the table to somebody in need, right? And running into the tax consequences associated with that. You can't do any of that without financial technology that wraps around a track set for you.
The reason why I came up is I was thinking about there are funds that are trying to support minority-owned businesses and businesses that are focused on things like the environment. Yes. And so they're not necessarily nonprofits, but they're doing good work trying to accomplish good things. And so if a 501c3, I'll get it before the end of the podcast. If that charity then, to your point, supports that and the technology can basically make that assignment so it's legal, then we can vote with our feet and put our money towards funds or toward companies that are doing good things, even if, to your point, even if they haven't gotten that designation yet.
That's right. And the cool thing about this is that the work that needs to be done to ensure that this is all IRS approved and legal does not rest on the company's responsibility. It rests on the charitable organization's responsibility. So there's a buffer that allows the company to partner with, a 501c3 organization that can do this. And then the IRS views the responsibilities for making those decisions and having all those boxes checked as the responsibility of that 501c3. And it just provides a layer of protection for companies that are looking to do some of these kind of innovative, unique things.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So the technology becomes the enabler and provides the context for how and who and what you can do. And so getting back to the point I was making before, so it's not just about money. It could be about donating time. It could be about donating property. Everybody has heard the Cars for Kids jingle and it's rattling around their brain. I've donated a car to it and then find out afterwards what they were donating to. And it's all good. It's all positive. But I think the question is that, that's one of the avenues that I think people forget. You were bringing this up before. It's not just about money. It's about other things as well. And I guess the technologies that are out there can support things like that beyond just money.
Yeah, I mean, the industry that we're in right now is super cool. The vertical, we call it the vertical. It's, all of these companies doing all these various things. And, they're companies that are just focusing on the volunteer aspect of this, right? They're just focusing on making that whole process of volunteering your time and tracking that and linking to the company, easier. And so you've just got all of this really innovative stuff that's going on around this changing definition of giving. And I agree that, being philanthropic is not just about having a lot of money, right? And going to a black tie and giving it away and getting your name on page 6 somewhere.
So, Joe, we've talked a lot about having corporate culture that drives giving. We've talked about how that impacts employees and how it impacts their relationship with the company. And then we talked a little bit about what that technology enables us to be able to do. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover before we close?
No, I think that we've done a pretty good job of covering all the bases. What I would say is that for the first time since companies have been giving money away, the access to these technological tools now exists for them. And, we coined this phrase Philantech, which I love because when you add tech to an industry, it does magical things. So if you think about biotech, health tech, ed tech, fintech, right? Adding technology does a couple of really critical things. It opens the market. So it makes things that weren't accessible to people that didn't have access to them. So you get a market that now has a bunch more people that are in there doing things. Technology doesn't care about how large you are, right? So it actually is beneficial to have more people doing little things than one person doing a large thing.
Right.
And then it democratizes, right? So it levels the playing field and it puts tools in people's hands that haven't had access to them. And then the tech side of it steps back and says, innovate and tell us what you want to do with this.
Right.
Tell us what your definition is of this. And let's see whether we can make this even easier for you. So it starts to feed on itself. And I think that when you look at where corporate giving is, and I think it gets maligned a little bit, like you'll hear these kind of throwaway lines of, corporations gave $20 billion last year and $7 billion in matching went unused. These are kind of these throwaway, almost urban legend lines, right? I've never been able to verify either one of those numbers. But what I can tell you is that if corporations were counting properly, that number 20 billion would be a lot higher because just about everyone who gives money away to charity works for a company, right?
Absolutely.
And they've been paid by that company and part of those dollars are going to charity. So corporations' involvement in both U.S. and global philanthropy is significantly higher. Right. And I think that, we just need to do a better job of counting that. And I think as soon as companies and employees understand that you can count it and you can make an impact and you don't have to have a lot of money, time, or you don't have to have these resources that you think that you need to have to really be philanthropic, that's when the magic starts. And that's probably what, as I'm sitting here today, that's what I'm most excited about.
I'm glad it's not called HR tech because FinTech gets a lot more investment, to be honest.
Yeah.
And for those of my friends
we're not
who,
dumb.
yeah, I know. But for those of my friends in the HR tech world, I'm not trying to malign you, and neither is Joe.
No,
but
never.
We all know that FinTech gets much more investment than HR tech does. But this is as human as you can get, right? This is the human in human resources being able to make those decisions to do those philanthropic activities and to give that money. So
yeah, I would end my deal with a challenge to the HR tech people that tune in and listen to this. And the challenge is to think outside the box as it relates to where a technology and a platform product like this fits. Because right. I think that, we spent a lot of time talking to HR tech people. We spent a lot of time talking to the benefits groups. And when you're in industries like that spend so much time slotting things, right?
Yep.
It's like, you're not a primary benefit, so you must be a secondary benefit. And this is an employee benefit. And I sit there and I keep reinforcing, this is a universal benefit, right? This is a corporate benefit and an employee benefit.
Right.
And it's not a secondary benefit, right? But it's a much more flexible type of benefit that's going to be really important to your company that really, in my opinion, needs to sit basically right next to your 401k. So, you're offering 401k on the financial side. You should be offering vehicles that allow for people to plan and manage their giving alongside of that. And that's been a challenge as HR and benefits tech has sat down and kind of looked at these things and said, where do they slot? So we're really challenging that industry to kind of think outside of the box on this.
Joe, we could have a completely other podcast on the silos of HR and HR technology and why things don't have the right economic owner. But we'll save that for another episode of the HR Data Labs podcast.
I'd be happy to come back.
We'd love that. Joe, thank you so much. You're awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You guys are great. Really appreciate the time.
We do too.
Thanks for being with us.
Dwight, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.